So before I go to Val, I also want to introduce our second speaker this morning on science culture, and that is Anastasia Koch. Anastasia is a protege of Valerie and also of Dick B. Warner, who's part of the group that is run here in TB Research. And Anastasia is a biomedical researcher and is one of the founding directors of woza, which is what you're going to hear about in the second talk. She completed her doctoral and postdoctoral training at UCT, and this was in the field of understanding the physiology of drug-resistant M. tuberculosis. She is now a junior research fellow within Val's unit. And in 2013, she had an informal discussion with a young artist, Ed Young, and this was the birth of woza, and I think you're going to hear about this in a lot more detail. This is a public engagement endeavor initially envisaged as a once-off, but has grown over the past 6 years to encompass multiple projects and is extremely exciting in its scope and vision.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anastasia Koch. Before I start, I just wanted to take a few seconds to thank Ron Vale, Janine, Matt, John, and the rest of the Janelia team for making this seminar series possible. And of course, Val for giving me the slot. So my name is Dr. Anastasia Koch. I'm a junior research fellow within the MMRU. That's Val's research group that she's just told you all about. I did my doctoral training under the supervision and mentorship of Val and Professor Digby Warner. But in the last few months, I've significantly pivoted my career, and I now spend most of my time running an organization called woza, which is what I'm going to be telling you about today. And before I start, I just wanted to contextualize a little bit. I know we've got a very global audience, so I thought I'd just let everybody know where Cape Town is, right there at the southernmost point of Africa. And then also some numbers, because I think it's really important to have a sense of these things for why we do our work and why we do it the way we do. So in South Africa, about 60% of people have access to internet. It's important to note that only 10% of people have access to stable home internet. And so many people rely on digital devices for access to the web. In 2016, about 50% of people completed secondary school. We've got very high rates of unemployment. It was sitting at 30%, and that was pre-COVID. And a study's just been released to indicate that that's much, much higher now. Very high rates of HIV and TB, and Monday's statistics showed that we had just over 516,000 cases of COVID in total in the country. Something else that I think is really important to mention, particularly for this talk, and in the context of the work that I'm about to tell you about, is the Wellcome Trust implemented a global survey in 2019, trying to gain a sense of what people feel and how much they trust science around the world. And South Africa is actually doing very well in this sphere. 74% of respondents said they would trust advice from doctors and nurses, and just over 50% of respondents said that they believe science in South Africa is beneficial. And South Africa is doing a lot better than many other countries in the world on this front. So what is public engagement? It's quite a diffuse term, and it's not, it hasn't been well defined. As a scholarly field, it's quite young, but it's how the benefits of higher education and research can be shared with the public. It's by definition a two-way process with the aim of generating mutual benefit. It can also be referred to or have components of things like civic engagement, the engaged university, community and public outreach, or science communication. So that brings me to the focus of the talk. What is woza? woza is a newly independent, not-for-profit organization with a mandate to establish a platform for public engagement within the local setting. The organization was incubated within a research institution, the IDM, that Val's just told you a lot about. And what we aim to do is to bring people from a vast range of disciplines together to engage young people in areas heavily burdened by infectious disease. We provide people with access to accurate information, and something to highlight here, which will hopefully come through later in the talk, is that we engage young people with biomedical research rather than health information. And we do this to encourage discussion and debates around health and disease in the hope that it will mitigate fear and stigma and encourage positive health-seeking behavior. The other thing that I should mention before I carry on is many of our projects are based in a place called Khayelitsha, which is a township in Cape Town with high rates of HIV and TB and other associated issues such as poverty, unemployment, gender-based violence. And that's really important to mention because this is an area where social issues really intersect with health and disease, and it's very difficult to de-link the issues. So before I tell you where we are and where we're going, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how the project started. It started in 2013 when I was a PhD student. I was doing very lab-based molecular work on the molecular determinants of drug resistance in Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And I felt really uncomfortable that I was living in a place with some of the highest rates of TB in the world, but I wasn't really engaging with people who are affected by the disease. And at the same time, I met artist Ed Young, who's pictured here, informally, and we started having a discussion about social responsiveness and engagement with health research. And I had arranged a health workshop with some other postgrad students, and I said to Ed, who's got lots of filmmaking experience, why don't you make a movie about us presenting our work to the young people? And Ed said, Anastasia, that would be really boring. Why don't we make a documentary about what young people feel and think about TB and how they've been impacted by the disease after you've done your health workshop? And that's what we did, and it went really well. This allowed us to establish collaboration for public engagement. And that's me on the left in my BSL-3 suit working in the TB lab. I really love showing this picture because no one ever believes that I ever did lab work, but here's the proof. And this happy looking guy over here I've already introduced. That's Ed Young, who's a conceptual and visual artist and also one of the co-founders and co-directors of woza. I must mention and thank a lot of other people who contribute to and support this work within the IDM and other partners, and also to thank all of our partners and funders who provide much needed resource in terms of funding, but also support in terms of institutional support and strategic direction. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about some of our projects so you get a flavor for what woza does. So to start off, I'm going to tell you about one of our oldest projects, which is called woza Learner Dockies. So what is woza Learner Dockies? First off, I should mention that it establishes collaboration with an NGO based in Khayelitsha that provides extracurricular tutoring to high school learners to increase secondary school marks and access to tertiary education. So we recruit our cohort of learners from this organization called the Convo Youth. We recruit 12 to 15 learners per year via a recruitment event that has a twofold purpose. The first purpose is we screen the previous cohort's productions at this event, so it acts as a celebratory event. And the second is it acts as a recruitment event to tell new applicants about the project and invite them to apply. It's also important for me to mention that we don't assess applicants based on academic potential, but rather a willingness to partake in the project and a desire to tell stories. So once we've recruited and selected 12 to 15 learners, we enter into our first workshop phase of the program, and these we call our science workshops. These are held at the Institute of Infectious Disease and Molecular Medicine, and I should mention two things here. The first is we have designed the workshops to be very hands-on and interactive, and particularly to engage around biomedical research rather than health information. And following on from that, the workshops were designed to capitalize on the expertise and experience of research groups that are world-class in terms of HIV and TB research, and you'll see some of that coming through. So our first science workshops really focus on what research is. So for example, in this workshop, we ask participants to plate, on agar plates, different surfaces, including their skin, and then hypothesize which surface might show the most bacterial growth. And participants are always shocked to see that there's more bacteria often growing from their arm than from a surface in the lab. We then talk a little bit about the basics of TB from a biomedical perspective. So the TB bacillus, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and the immunological aspects of the disease. And then we move into a TB drug discovery workshop, which is run by members of the MMRU. And as you've heard from Val, this research group's got a vast experience in TB drug discovery. We also do a TB vaccinology workshop, which is run by members of the South African TB Vaccine Initiative. This is quite a big vaccine development group with a long history of TB vaccine development. And then our final workshop is a clinical trials workshop held in collaboration with CIDRI Africa. And in this workshop, we randomize participants to either Coke or Diet Coke as the investigational product to see which investigational product impacts participants' performance on a maths test. And this is really to engage people and give a sense to participants of how clinical trials work and some of the issues like randomization and bias. So once participants have been through all of these workshops and have a bit of a sense about what biomedical research is and how it operates, we ask learners to design their own research question and to present this back to facilitators as if they were applying for funding. And we're always really impressed by the kinds of questions that come up and how relevant they are and actually feasibly, could be feasibly investigated. So once participants have been through the science workshop of the program, we move into the media production phase. And here, because we've taught young people about what research is, we ask young people to become researchers themselves. So to document what people think and feel about TB in their neighborhoods and communities and what impact the disease has had. So learners are provided with equipment to take home and interview within their neighborhoods and communities. We also take learners on shoot days to guide learners on the storytelling, interviewing, and the ethics of storytelling. Once learners have amassed enough footage, they move into the editing phase of the program where they edit on professional grade editing software and create films about the social and personal impacts of TB in South Africa. The other thing that I should just stop and mention here is there's also an element of skills development to this project. So learners are exposed to professional biomedical research environments during the science workshops and also gain skills in media editing. And the other thing that's important to point out here is that learners have complete control in the process of creating films, from conceptualization to shooting to the final edit. And I think this is really important when considering issues of representation in storytelling. So that's our inaugural project. I thought I'd just add something in. These are some of our outcomes to date. We've produced 24 documentaries, or facilitated production of 24 documentaries by engaging over 85 learners to date. We have 6 biomedical research workshops annually, and we mainly disseminate online. And pre-COVID, we were having 2 to 3 screenings annually. And because this project has been running so long, this kind of infrastructure allows us to capitalize on opportunities and have ad hoc workshops. So we were able to facilitate an outreach workshop during the Imaging Africa workshop that happened in January 2020. And I put this in specifically because I hope lots of people from Janelia are on this call, and I think some of you will recognize Leon. And so learners were able to participate in a one-day microscopy workshop and were exposed to the high-level faculty that visited South Africa for this program. And we also had a really nice hands-on component to the workshop where young people were able to build folderscopes to gain an understanding of the principles of microscopy. So I want to move on quickly and tell you a little bit about another core project of ours, which is creatively named the Drug Resistant TB Musician MSF Collaboration. It's not the most creative title. And what this project aims to do is it aims to bring young survivors of drug-resistant TB together with musicians who are based in Khayelitsha, in the hope that the experience of having had and survived drug-resistant TB inspires the production of new music and music videos. And we learned a lot during this project. It was actually quite a challenge to create a space where people felt comfortable sharing very intimate stories. And what we quickly realized is that having drug-resistant TB and being on therapy for chemotherapy for such a long time is actually quite a traumatic process, especially for a young person. But the project was successful, and we've managed to shoot 2 music videos, and these are some stills from there. This project is also ongoing, and we'll have an outdoor concert upon completion of the project. The other thing that I should highlight is that this is a collaboration with the global medical charity, Médecins Sans Frontières, and that's where we recruit DRTB survivors from. So that's a flavor of some of our core projects. The other thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about is engaged scholarship. And so we have quite a strong focus on engaged scholarship, where we hope to generate, and we are generating, formal scholarly research around public engagement. And the way we do this is we have 2 PhD candidates in anthropology who are investigating how knowledge is configured and produced within the program. We've also established a postgraduate techniques course in community engagement. So when junior postgrad students are learning about core biomedical research techniques like PCR and cloning and bioinformatics, they also have a module on community and public engagement, so that young biomedical researchers at the very early stages of their career can start to understand the importance of this work and some of the ways to accomplish it. We've published a couple of papers and we need to publish another one this year, but I think lots of researchers always feel that pressure. And so those are some of the highlights of what we've been doing and how we've gotten to this point. And so I wanted to talk briefly about where we're at now. We're in a transition phase and what the future holds for us. So in January 2020, we were awarded a Wellcome Trust Discretionary Award in Public Engagement. And what that's allowed us to do is to establish an independent not-for-profit for public engagements in the region. We were incubated within the IDM and within UCT, so we will maintain very close links with these two institutions. And I'll just give you a quick flavor about where we hope to be going, and then talk about a little bit about how we've pivoted to COVID. So our first focus area for this grant is to consolidate the previous projects that we've been running and to apply the learnings to iteratively improve them. We also have a big focus on networking and collaboration to share learnings and also to generate a network of stakeholders who are all involved in public engagements within the local setting. Another huge focus area for us is to generate evidence for the impact or lack thereof for public engagements and what it can accomplish and how it can be improved. And finally, we have a very big focus on capacity development and sustainability, both from a funding perspective, but also from a skills and human capital perspective. And that's what I want to talk about now to show you how we've been able to pivot from tuberculosis and HIV to COVID. So for the past 12 months, Ed's been training previous participants of their woza project in creative skills around filmmaking and creative aspects of the project. And so it's important to mention that these young people have had no formal training in filmmaking or film production and have really learned hands-on and on the job. And so over the past 12 months, Ed's been having bi-weekly workshops with these young people. And what that meant is when the COVID pandemic hit and lockdown measures were implemented, we had a team of people based in Khayelitsha who could start generating independent content around the impact of COVID on their communities and neighborhoods. And so this team is led by Samuel Flans, pictured here, and he leads a team of 3 trainees who have been able to generate 4 documentaries around the impacts of COVID in Khayelitsha. And these documentaries have been screened on national news with over 50,000 views each. The other thing that we've done is a little bit of writing about how COVID has interacted and intersected with diseases that are already endemic in South Africa, like drug-resistant TB. And I've put our web address at the end of this presentation in case anyone's interested in looking more closely at the media or reading any of this. The other thing that we've been able to do via our networks is to capitalize on our partnerships with artists to generate some informational animations around COVID. And so this is a collaboration with a South African artist who's generating some informational animations for us. This is around the basic behavioral changes to help contain COVID. And we've just done one on masks, and we just released a new one yesterday, which is available on our website. And so I'm going to leave it there. I haven't been able to tell you about all the elements of the project, all our ideas going forward, but I really hope that you'll follow us on all our social media and have a look at our website and follow us on this journey. And my contact details are there, so please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any ideas or questions or comments. So thank you very much for everyone for listening, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Anastasia. That was a wonderful talk, and that is some really amazing work being done by woza. I did want to mention that you put up a slide with Liang, and you alluded to the Imaging Africa initiative, and Liang will actually be giving a talk in this series later on in the series to tell us about the Advanced Imaging Center at Janelia and more about the Imaging Africa initiative. So that should be exciting. I want to start with a sort of simple question that maybe a lot of us are wondering, but where did the name woza come from?
I get asked that question a lot. It's a little bit funny. It's an anagram of the founders' names. So it's Ed, Herman, Warner, who's Digby, Olivia, Janelia, and Anastasia. And very, very loosely translated, it sort of translates to, hey, come with us. But when the project started, we needed to put a name on the consent forms. And that was something we sort of quickly came up with in the lab while we were frantically putting together content forms. So yeah, it's and then kind of, yeah.
Very relevant. So let's see, we have a question from Ron Vale. Ron, would you like to ask Anastasia your question?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, Anastasia, woza is just really amazing project, very, very creative. Kind of amazed what you did in really combining science and art together. It's really amazing how it's evolving too. So my question is, have you followed the participants who've come through and kind of followed their trajectory afterwards, you know, to see if they've, you know, gone into film or science?
Thanks very much, Ron. That's an excellent question. We get asked this question a lot, and I'm actually just seeing in the chat that Linda Gales asked a similar question. So we haven't formally, we could, so that information would be quite easily accessible from Ikamva Youth, where we recruit most of our learners from. I can tell you anecdotally that at the beginning of the project, many of the learners expressed interest in science careers and would sort of informally follow up with me and ask for advice around that. But anecdotally, in the sort of later stages of the project, sort of last year and the year before, I'm getting the sense that learners are more interested in film, but there's no like formal evidence for that. And we could very easily get it, but we don't think that that's the most important outcome for the project. So we think that by investing in young people quite intensively, we hope to accomplish other things, regardless of what young people go on to do. So we hope to encourage a sense of agency and hope within the young cohorts. And so we're very focused on measuring those kinds of things. And we also want to increase general scientific literacy, where the young people end up becoming accountants or lawyers or scientists or doctors or filmmakers. But it is a metric that we could easily get from our partner organizations.
So I want to ask just a follow-up question, sort of related to Ron's question is, you guys are coming up now on, or you've just passed about 5 years, I think, with woza, right? And you did touch on how you might either quantitatively or qualitatively you know, gauge the success of the program. And I'm sure this could be a whole separate talk and discussion, but can you give us some hint about how you think that might be done?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of, so I mean, I think maybe it's important to just clarify that we're sort of only an independent, we've only been an independent organization for 6 months. So a lot of these strategies are still developing. And of course, if there's anyone on the call who has sort of advice or ideas, we would absolutely love to hear about them. But we're probably going to have a tiered approach. And so the first approach would be sort of very important, but sort of basic things. So attendance registers, how many of our workshops are attended, how many people view our media, how many participants applications do we get. Then we would have a slightly more complex, a slightly more involved set of evaluations that would cover things like, do technical skills in the project improve? Does knowledge around infectious disease improve? And we'd mostly do that around via surveys and focus groups. And then we're hoping to generate a very cutting edge and academic tier of our impact evaluation, where we really, really want to investigate how this changes how learners or participants feel about themselves and what that means for what they end up doing with their lives. And so less about the particular career, but does this project, is it able to instill a sense of confidence among participants? And then are we increasing rates of scientific literacy? And so we're establishing a collaboration with some social and behavioral economists to help us design an approach to that and guide us in that.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to, let's see, Sunny, who has a question. Shini, are you there? Would you like to ask? I am going to perhaps ask a question on behalf of Shini then. Shini wants to know is, does your organization have any role in science policy, or do you anticipate any future roles in science policy?
So that's a really good question. We don't at present. We don't have very strong links to any decision-making bodies, at least within South Africa, but they're definitely the kinds of collaborations that we would love to establish as time goes on. I mean, I should probably mention we're a really small team. So it's predominantly myself and Ed running the day-to-day operations with a lot of strategic oversight and advice from Digby. And then we have a project manager and a creative, Sam, who's the junior creative manager of the team in Kailicha. So a lot of what we do is dependent on how much capacity we have, and we're often finding ourselves going, okay, we have to pace ourselves and make strategic decisions about what we can do, because we can't do everything, and we also don't want to sacrifice quality over quantity. But it is the kind of thing that we would like to move into as the organization grows.
That makes sense. How about a question from Linda Gale? Linda, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah. Thanks. Simple one. Hi, Anastasia. Always nice to hear progress. Just a sort of gender balance in terms of your recruits. I'm interested if you're attracting men as much as women or vice versa.
Hi, Linda Gill. Nice to hear from you. We attract way more women than we do men, and we can't quite figure out what that's about. On average, over the last 6 years, we've had about 80% young women who apply for the project. Some years we've had absolutely no young men enrolled in woza learner dockies. And I'm not sure if that reflects a bias for sort of cohorts that are recruited to Kamva Youth, and how that reflects on then how we recruit learners. But it is very interesting. Our cohorts are mostly women.
So Anastasia, another attendee wants to know if you're planning to expand woza to other countries and possibly involving other kinds of diseases.
So that's also a really good question. We're very much focused on Southern Africa now. So we recently ran a project in Gaborone in January as well, where we implemented a pilot set of workshops around HIV, mainly around young participants who are HIV positive. I mean, we collaborated with the Botswana-Harvard HIV partnership to do that. And so our sort of focus is expanding to other parts of Africa. We'd be happy to work on any disease. And so we believe that there was a model with the right inputs and guidance and expertise can be applied to any disease, both infectious and non-communicable. So we would really like to go that way in the future. A lot of the way woza runs and the sort of direction it takes is often based on what opportunities are available. So if there were other opportunities to work in other countries that are not necessarily Southern Africa, we'd still really love to do that. But our sort of like strategic focus is Southern Africa.
Well, thank you. I think it'll be really interesting to follow the work of woza in the coming months and years. Can you remind us again, before we end, how the audience can find more information and in particular access the documentaries that were made by your learners?
Yes, I will share my screen, but I could also put the web address in the chat, Slack channel, but I can also put it in the chat box if people want to see. But this is our website address without the exclamation mark, and those are all of our social media handles and also our Gmail account. So if people are interested in getting in touch, please do. I'd love to hear any comments or questions or ideas.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, I think we're going to end it here. I put a link to our Slack channel in the chat box. If anybody has any other questions, Val and Anastasia have promised me that they will head over to the Slack channel and answer them. I want to, again, very much thank our speakers today, Val and Anastasia. They were beautiful talks. I want to thank our audience for joining us today. And I want to let you know to tune in next week. Next Wednesday, we will hear from the National Center for Biological Sciences in Bangalore. And the speakers will be Uma Ramakrishnan and Jayashri Ratnam. So I'll see you next Wednesday. Thanks, everyone.